This topic is all about nutrition, and the title of my presentation is Eating Balanced and Healthy During Stressful Times and Why It Matters. I am the dietitian for Student Life Dining Services. Basically, what I do is I help students who have food allergies or other unique dietary needs to kind of navigate the meal plan and figure out what to eat on campus while they're here. Okay, so just a little bit about last week, quickly, just a review. The topic was mental resilience and kindness. Just a reminder to pause and consciously think about how you want to respond, which I know I need to work on that. Actively listen without forming a response. Practice staying hopeful and positive. Say, I am resilient, which we will talk about a little bit with regards to nutrition as well today. Practice in small and big moments to feel grateful. Choose acceptance, say, I have this. Actively choose kindness, and practice positive self-talk. And then if you're interested in more information, there's a website or there's an email there. And then you can also type in kindness at Ohio State on Google, and you'll get to a great website with some more information. Okay, so we're going to kick off today's presentation talking a little bit about food as a coping mechanism. Right now, all of us are going through a lot of emotions, probably more so than normal, whether it's increased stress with kids going, running around the house, or even boredom because we don't have the camaraderie of coworkers, anxiety, sadness, whatever it is. We've all got some increased emotions most likely around this time. And I want you to know that eating to comfort during stressful times or times of high emotion can really be a part of a healthy relationship with food, especially if it's done with these three things in mind. The first one is if it's not chronic. So if you're constantly going to food as a way to cope with your stress or emotions, that could potentially be an issue. You might want to kind of find out other ways to cope and heal with those emotions. Also, if you're constantly, making yourself feel guilty about eating certain foods when you're stressed, or you're at a high emotional level, or you're judging yourself or berating yourself for eating certain things or certain amounts of foods, that could also be a problem. So going back to the kindness, not only is it important to be kind to others, but it's also important to be kind to yourself. I would almost argue it's more important. That's the most important thing. It's also going to be part of a healthy relationship with food if it's done while staying in touch with your physical hunger cues and your satiety levels, which we're going to get into right now. Okay, so this is a picture of the hunger scale. And this kind of goes back to what we learned in week 3 about mindfulness. If you Google mindfulness on the internet, you'll see a lot of information, but a lot of times it has to do with food and being mindful of your hunger and satiety levels. So you may have seen this scale before, and basically the sweet spot is right there where I circle, that in between that 4 and 7. If you've been around a newborn baby or even any young children, which you probably all have somewhat recently or maybe right now, you will probably see or understand that as children, we are very, very good about being in tune with our hunger and our fullness levels. Somehow, as we get into adulthood, we sort of drift away from that and we kind of lose that attunement. So it's going to be important to work on getting more in touch with our physical hunger versus our emotional hunger. And if you're anything like me, which my guess is that you are, during this time of increased stress, you have been eating more because of emotional hunger versus physical hunger. So physical hunger, you're probably all aware of what that feels like. It's going to be that stomach growling. You've probably all felt it, but if you haven't felt it in a while, this is just a reminder to kind of become more attuned to that. So level 4 is the kind of the sweet spot when it's good to start maybe thinking about what you're going to eat. You've kind of got that slight stomach growling. Really right before you get so hungry where you're irritable, or maybe you've heard the term hangry before. You don't want to get to that point. So you've got the slight stomach growling. And then you eat too when you're comfortably full, but you're not so full that you're uncomfortable. Kind of like on Thanksgiving, you know, after you eat all that food, you just want to go take a nap. It's not the tryptophan, I'll tell you that right now. It's really the amount of food that you've eaten that makes you want to take a nap. So, you know, working towards not getting to that point often. So again, that sweet spot's going to be in between that 4 and 7. Really, if you think about it, and I know I've been there, if you get to that level 3, 2, or especially 1, that's when you're most likely to then eat past that level 7. You get so hungry or distracted, whether you're, you know, immersed in something at work or you're out shopping, running errands, and you just forgot to eat, which I think is crazy. Maybe you forgot to pack something in your bag as a snack. You end up getting so hungry, you finally get around food and you eat past that comfortable fullness to that level 8, 9, or even 10. So if you're constantly eating past that 7, there's a quote in one of my favorite books called Intuitive Eating, which I'll talk about in a second here. It says, if my body only needs a certain amount of food to feel satisfied, but I continue to eat after I'm full, then what other need am I trying to fill with the food? Possibly it's an emotional need, satisfaction. Maybe you're constantly eating diet foods, so you're not actually feeling satisfied. Therefore, you're always eating past that level 7. Something to think about. I did put a link there too. So when you get this presentation after this is over with, you can click on that link if you're interested in more information. All right. So my favorite book, one of my favorite books, I shouldn't say my favorite, but it's called Intuitive Eating, and it's by Elise Resch and Evelyn Tribble. And if you're interested in intuitive eating, there's actually a lot of really good groundbreaking research that was done right here at Ohio State University on intuitive eating. In fact, there was a 6-week course that the integrative medicine department released this year. I know they did it this year. They'll probably most likely do it again next year if you're interested. I haven't heard much about it, but my guess that it was pretty great. So this quote was from that book, and it says, find ways to comfort, nurture, distract, and resolve your issues without using food. Anxiety, loneliness, boredom, and anger are all emotions we experience throughout life. Food won't fix any of these feelings. It may comfort or distract for the short term, but you'll ultimately have to deal with the source of that emotion. So like I said at the beginning, it's definitely a part of a healthy relationship with food to use food every once in a while to kind of help yourself feel better. But when it's chronic, that's when it might become a problem, and you might want to start looking for other ways to de-stress and heal your emotions. And that brings me to this slide. Managing stress and emotions without food exclusively. Because, you know, we all every once in a while are going to go to food, especially when our emotion is happiness. You know, who doesn't want to go out for a good juicy burger or something when they're feeling happy and they're celebrating something? So here's a question you can ask yourself. You know, I know working from home for me, I've found that, and my husband probably thinks I eat all the time, but sometimes I'll just mindlessly wander down to the refrigerator or the pantry and I just open it and I don't even get anything, but I'm just like, okay, what am I going to eat? What do I want? I don't even know. But here's something that you can ask yourself if you do find that you're doing that more often, especially now. Ask, what am I feeling now? And then what do I need now? And really, it's simply acknowledging that you have needs that need to be met that could be therapeutic. So for example, maybe I'm going to the refrigerator after I'm done with this presentation and I say, okay, what am I feeling now? I'm bored. Okay, what do I need now? You know, I'm not physically hungry. Maybe instead of grabbing something to eat or just simply opening the refrigerator, what I actually need is a good book, or I need to call my mom or a friend to talk to. Or maybe even go for a walk, since it keeps saying it's going to rain, but it hasn't yet. Knock on wood. All right, so now I'm going to release my first poll question. Let's hope this works. And hopefully you can all see it. I'm going to actually relaunch it. And the question is, what are some things you do to handle stress and emotions instead of using food? And the options are read a book, take a bath, exercise, call a friend, write in a journal, do a brain game, which has been one of my favorite things lately, play an instrument, or other. And I'll give you maybe about 5 more seconds. All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and end it. And hopefully you can all see that. I've never done a poll on a Zoom video before.
We just have to click share results. I can do that for you.
Oh, thank you. When I practiced this, I didn't have to click share and they saw it. So, all right. So thanks, Dave. As you can see, exercise. I am not surprised by that at all. And I am definitely with you. Exercise has been one of my favorite things to do to release stress over these last, well, really ever, I would say. Exercise is one of my favorites. So great. Thanks for doing that. We will head on to the next slide. All right. So what about the effects of stress on our body? It's so funny. I always laugh and kind of cringe as well when I see Yahoo articles or any type of article in a magazine that says, you know, top 10 foods that will reduce stress. I'll tell you right now, foods themselves do not reduce stress. There is no magical food out there that's going to reduce your stress. There are certainly foods that might help you calm down, or there are certain herbs and teas. You know, we've all experienced those before, and they can certainly help. But there's no food out there that's going to reduce your stress. But they can certainly, you know, help ameliorate the effects of stress. So what are the effects of stress on your body that are negative? I found this photo on the internet, and again, the source is there if you're interested in it. And I just thought it depicted kind of those the effects of cortisol levels, which when we're chronically stressed, we have elevated cortisol levels. And that's generally what causes all of the negative side effects of stress. Some of those include imbalance in blood sugar. And if you're thinking to yourself, no big deal, I don't have diabetes. Well, a lot of us are pre-diabetic, or perhaps we have gestational diabetes, or maybe you don't even have any of those right now. But if you're chronically stressed, it could kind of throw you off into that category of pre-diabetes or diabetes. Also inflammation. And inflammation is really what is linked to pretty much any chronic disease that you can even imagine. One of them is listed there, and that's heart disease. You can also think cancer. That's a big one as well that has to do with inflammation. Also, gut issues are a big one. So if you're chronically stressed, it's really going to affect the microbiome, your gut, basically. And about 70% of your gut is actually your immune system. So your immune system actually resides right there in your gut. So if your gut is out of balance, it's going to affect negatively your immune system. And that, of course, is listed there as well. It can also affect your sleep, which I believe, even as a dietitian, I will say this. Sleep, I would say, is probably even more important than physical activity, healthy eating. If you're not getting good sleep, you know, it's almost like a domino effect. It's going to affect your whole body and all those dimensions of wellness. And then lastly, impaired memory and cognitive function. Okay, so that's great, Gina. Now what? Foods and habits that mitigate the effects of stress. Here we go. We already talked a little bit about listening to your hunger cues versus using foods to cope. So if you're constantly going to food for emotional reasons, most likely you're going to be over consuming food. And that's not good for the long run for anyone. So using foods as a way to cope with your emotions is going to negatively affect your stress in many ways and your body. Also, it's important to allow all foods to fit without the guilt. I'm one of those dietitians that truly, truly believes that all foods have a role in a balanced diet, no matter what the food is. And you're actually making matters worse and will probably in the long run increase your stress levels if you constantly make yourself feel guilty for eating certain foods that maybe you deem as bad or dangerous foods. Of course, there's always anti-inflammatory foods, which you probably all know about. First and foremost, I always say fruits and vegetables are the most important, which is so great because it's almost summer. You wouldn't believe it by going outside now, but it's almost summer. And so many of my favorite, and probably yours too, fruits and vegetables are about to be in season. Maybe some of you are planting your own gardens at home. So fruits, vegetables, also whole grains, legumes like peanuts, also lentils, chickpeas, any type of bean that you can imagine, and seeds, chia seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds. one tip that I have, especially lately, is I've been trying to, not only for my kids, but for me and my husband as well, put the, more health promoting foods in the front of the pantry and the front of the refrigerator. So if I do mindlessly go downstairs to the kitchen and open the door, at least I see those foods first versus, marshmallows or chocolate. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but if it's not the first thing I see, I'm less likely to eat it, especially when I'm not necessarily physically hungry. And then there's pro and prebiotics. Like I already said, 80%, 70 to 80% of your immune system resides right there in your gut. So it's important to make sure that you keep your gut healthy. And so what are some sources of pro and prebiotics? I'm actually drinking one right now. I've been really into kombucha lately for my probiotics. Obviously, yogurt's another great source. Kefir or kefir, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, but it's basically a yogurt drink. And then, of course, there's kimchi and sauerkraut. So probiotics are those good, helpful bacteria. And then you really can't increase your probiotics just by consuming them. You also have to give those probiotics their food. So it's a symbiotic relationship, and that's the prebiotic. Some good sources of those: onion, garlic, chicory root, which seems to be in almost everything now. Another word for that is inulin. Artichokes, green bananas. So those are all good sources, just some of a few of the good sources of prebiotics. So again, they've got sort of definitely a symbiotic relationship. So consume them both. Okay. What about creating a balanced plate? This is probably what the information that maybe a lot of you are waiting for. You could ask 1,000 dietitian or, nutrition professionals what their definition of a balanced plate is. And you'll probably get very, very similar answers with maybe some nuanced differences here and there. My general recommendation, if you're trying to create a balanced plate or a balanced meal, is to make at least half your plate fruit or vegetables, and then include at least 2 other food groups. This is a great example of that. So this is actually from the Canadian Dietary Guidelines. You're probably asking, why are you using the image from the Canadian Dietary Guidelines? It's very, very similar to ours here in America. It's just real foods. It's not quite as juvenile. I just like the brightness and the color. And you can just look at this picture and it gives you a ton of ideas of how you can make a balanced plate. So it gives you a lot of examples of fruits and vegetables right there. The protein foods, of course. They also include the yogurt in the protein foods. So they actually only have 4 food groups, whereas we consider yogurt part of the dairy food group or dairy alternatives. So I kind of like how they embedded it there in the protein foods, and then also the whole grains. Another definition or recommendation I typically give to people if they're trying to make a balanced plate, let's say they're somewhere where they just don't have access to fruits and vegetables. I always think about airports. They're terrible at with fruits and vegetables. Or maybe you're just learning how to enjoy fruits and vegetables. You can just take some baby steps. Another definition that I give, though, is just to aim for, or recommendation, 3 food groups. Okay, so what are the food groups? Like I've already said, fruits, vegetables, protein, grains, preferably whole, and then dairy or dairy alternatives, almond milk, soy milk, coconut milk. You don't have to consume dairy if you don't want to. Just make sure they're fortified with vitamin D and calcium. I've got to say that. All right, so what about some real life examples of balanced plates? These beautiful pictures were taken by me in our amazing dining services operations in student life. This is the food that our students get to enjoy every day. On the left there is a bowl of pasta topped with some grilled steak, some broccoli, mushrooms, Parmesan cheese, and pesto. So I've got my 3 food groups there, at least half of which is fruit or vegetable. You'll notice in most of these pictures, there's at least some mushrooms. I've got kind of an addiction to mushrooms, and broccoli, I think, too, actually. The middle one there is grilled chicken, and there's a composed salad with quinoa and maybe some craisins, I think, in there, and some chickpeas. I've got a side of fruit and then some raw vegetables over there, which I do not eat those by themselves. I assure you, there's a little cup of ranch to the right that just got cut out of that picture. And then over on the right, there is a grain bowl, and there's quinoa underneath there, and it's topped with some ginger, feta, more broccoli, more mushroom, tomato, and chicken. So those are meals I'm really missing right now, but I can also make them here if I wanted to, and I do. Okay, so what about filling in the gaps with snacks? I am a huge snack fan. I probably snack 3 times a day. I like to use snacks for several reasons. One of them is to make sure that I'm getting all the food groups that I need. So, I mentioned aiming for 3 food groups in all of your entrees or your meals and trying to make at least half your meals fruit or vegetable. I tend to not consume any fruit or vegetable for breakfast. I don't know why, I just never have. So I try to make my first snack in between my breakfast and my lunch include some type of a fruit or vegetable to kind of make up for that. So again, I use snacks to sort of fill in the gaps that I'm missing as far as food groups and nutrients in my entrees. Also, going back to that hunger scale that I talked to you about earlier, if I didn't have snacks, I would be constantly eating towards that 8 or 9 on the scale because I'd probably be waiting until I'm a 3 or a 2 to eat. I generally eat when I'm at work, at 7:30, and then I don't eat lunch until maybe 12:30 or 1. That's a long time for me and for most people to go without eating. If I didn't have a snack, I'd become way too hungry. I'd become hangry, and then I would eat past that, comfortable fullness. So that's why I really use snacks to help me with that. And this is just a picture of some energy bites I've made, and I've been really into banana bread and banana muffins. So I just take banana bread recipes and put them into a muffin. All right, we're going to do another poll here. Here is the question. What kind of snacker are you? Either I never snack, I snack about once a day, or I snack in between most meals. I'll give you guys about 5 more seconds. Okay. I'm going quickly here because I know we don't have that much time. And I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Wow. It looks like the majority of you are with me. You snack in between most meals. And then about 42% of you snack about once a day. So only 3% never snack. All right. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. If that works for you, that is absolutely fine. Some other examples of snacks that I've been snacking on lately and that really I snack on a regular basis. Cheese sticks. I love now that they don't just have mozzarella, but they also have cheddar and even Colby Jack cheese sticks. I love any type of cracker that has whole grains in it. I've got an 88 Acres bar there, which I absolutely love as well. We sell those on campus, so of course I love them. I sometimes, a bar or a cracker isn't enough for me, so I'll top it with some peanut butter just to kind of make me feel more full and to stick with me a little bit longer for that protein and fat. Sometimes I'll just snack on a piece of fruit or I'll snack on a yogurt. I found these recently. This is I think it's Fino Lemon. It's a new flavor of Chobani that I've been addicted to lately. And then sometimes my snack is more like a meal. I made this about 2 weeks into quarantine. It was a piece of toast, an egg, some avocado, and tomato. It was more like a second breakfast. But hey, when you're hungry, you eat, right? There's no rules, in my opinion. All right, speaking of no rules, what about comfort foods? I found this great quote from Janelle Bayless from the Wellness Center. She has a great blog that you can find on the Student Life Wellness Center webpage. And on her blog, she wrote, "Comfort foods remind us of our social ties and connections and experiences." So what more do we want right now when we're not getting that? It's comfort foods. I also found this on Instagram. Comfort food is a normal human coping mechanism. So again, if you're craving comfort food and if you're enjoying comfort food during this time, stop making yourself feel guilty about it. It's completely normal and acceptable, and it can absolutely fit into a healthy, balanced diet. I love this photo on the right there. It's from a podcast called Diet Riot. It says, "Oh, those are dangerous." And then food isn't dangerous unless it's poisoned. Amen. Then there's me on the left. My favorite comfort food. I'm one who always craves sweets. Sometimes it's salty food that I crave, but generally it's sweets. My all-time favorite food is wedding cake, and it has to have buttercream on it. If it's fondant, I won't eat it. I'm not going to waste my time or energy, but that was a good cake in that picture right there. I found this also on Instagram. You don't have to just use food to comfort. Some of the things that I've been using to comfort in addition to food, exercise, which I think a lot of you are doing as well. Number 3 on there is that kombucha, which I've also been obsessed with. 4, wearing flip-flops around the house. Love it. 5, reading a book. I've read lots of good books during this time. And then I'm going to skip down to number 10, which is ear pods. I think that's what they're called, just for listening to good podcasts, which has been really comforting to me during this time and really always. So maybe some of you can resonate with that. All right, what about making comfort foods more nutrient dense? My definition of nutrient dense or making comfort foods or anything more nutrient dense is basically, how do you add more nutrition to something? So for example, I make, like I said, banana bread, quick breads. It could either mean taking away some of the sugar or taking away some of the salt, or even adding something to it, like extra banana or oats or tomato in my, tuna melt there. So that's what I consider making something more nutrient dense. Generally, it consists of adding something that has nutrition, but it could also mean taking something away. So maybe you're making a sauce for a pasta and it calls for half a cup of salt, but you only add a quarter of a cup. But some of my examples here would be that quick bread. It called for, on the left there, a full cup of sugar. I only added a half a cup, and then I think I added another half a banana. There in the middle was a banana bread pudding. I added oatmeal to it, just old-fashioned oats. And then on the right there, something that I absolutely love is tuna melts, and I added a couple slices of tomato to make it more nutrient dense. And that brings us to our last poll. And what are some ways you like to make comfort foods more nutrient dense? Maybe you add extra vegetables or fruits to dishes. Maybe you use whole grain flour. Some of my favorites that are gluten-free include oat flour or brown rice flour. Maybe you use less salt or sugar in recipes, or maybe you do something else. And I'm going to end the polling in about 5 seconds. All right, let's see. Oh. It looks like the majority of you add extra veggies or fruit, which I am definitely with you. And then after that, use less sugar or salt in recipes. That's great. All right. All right, so lastly here, I really am going to encourage you all to make a SMART goal based on all that I've talked about today. And I love this picture because it says exactly what a SMART goal is. It needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So you can't just say, this week I will eat healthier, or next week I will, not make myself feel guilty when I eat certain foods. It needs to be very specific. For example, I will write my feelings in a journal once a day for 1 week, or I will build a balanced plate at least once a day for 1 week based on my definition of a balanced plate. Or I will take one favorite comfort food recipe and make it more nutrient dense. So those are some examples that you can do, or you can come up with your own, obviously. All right, so skill building for this week. Just a reminder to tune into your body's hunger cues whenever you can. Go back to that chart, that hunger cue scale. Integrate alternatives to food for calming stress and emotions, which it sounds like most of you are already doing. Construct a balanced plate when able. Consider nutrient density and ways to increase the nutrient density in some of your favorite foods. Create a nutrition SMART goal. And then lastly, you're going to be getting a link to 2 cooking videos that I put together with the help of our corporate executive chef, Lisa Holford, within Student Life Dining Services. We encourage you to take a look at those videos and hopefully get inspired and make some new dishes. All right. We appreciate your feedback. So after this presentation, there will be a brief survey. And of course, that's how you'll get your points on Virgin Pulse if you're interested in that. Next week, we've got Dr. Bernadette Melnick, who will be talking about gratitude and positivity, a dynamic duo in the midst of COVID-19 storm. And then this is from Everyday Health, just some links if you're interested in learning more about different ways to mitigate stress and how to use food to help you with that. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Gina. We're going to do I just want to take a few minutes to do some of the Q&A. We have a ton of questions in here. We're definitely not going to get to cover them all. Gina, did you have your contact info anywhere in here? Because I'm just going to encourage the audience to spam you with emails if we don't get to their question. So if everyone wants to hang out for a few minutes, we'll get through as many as we can. So to start, actually, Gina, do you mind going back to the survey link slide so that way people can see that well?
The survey link slide?
I think so. Yeah, I think that'd be the best one to leave up.
The survey link slide.
And somebody made a good point, and just to remember that links in when you're sharing your screen, those links are not clickable. So, but that is something I believe that we do email out, right?
Correct.
Right.
You will be receiving an email in a couple minutes.
Yeah, you'll be getting email. So.
Yep. All right. So for some questions, I have the opposite problem when stressed, no appetite. Is it best to stick to a regular eating schedule each day? Example, eat breakfast around the same time each day, even if I don't feel hungry at that time, or truly eat when I'm hungry?
I think so. Yes. And, I absolutely have that problem sometimes too. And it's funny that it's not as common for sure, but I would definitely say yes. And also try to think of easy ways to get calories, like smoothies. I will tell you, I had that problem this morning, probably because I was just excited about giving this presentation. So I quickly downed a very nutrient-dense smoothie. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Kind of stick to a routine and it'll stimulate your appetite, hopefully.
Are there food tips that you'd recommend for people who might suffer from IBD, ulcerative colitis, or even diverticulitis? I think I said those right. Where the gut is already negatively impacted and some foods trigger responses.
That's probably not an answer that I'm happy to answer that via an email, because yes, I certainly have some tips.
Okay. Can you expand on the symbiotic relationship between pro and prebiotics? Does timing matter? I've never heard this before.
So no, timing does not matter. So basically, probiotics are those, positive, healthy bacteria that you're putting into your body. And in order for them to thrive, they need those prebiotics, which are the food for your gut bacteria. You do not need to consume them at the same time, no. But even, a lot of the newest research is even saying for those who have IBS, the most important thing is those prebiotics, more so even than the probiotics, because we've already got a lot of those good bacteria in our gut naturally. But by us consuming that food for the good bacteria, it kind of helps expand them in our gut. I can certainly send some papers and research if whoever asked that question is interested, but it's pretty much as simple as that. There's definitely recommendations as far as how much or how little, depending on what you're aiming for, but the research is really in its infancy when it comes to that. But the basic guideline is to consume both in your diet as much as you can.
One person asks, and a lot of people have upvoted this question, how can I get addicted to mushrooms and broccoli rather than cookies, salty and crunch snacks, or ice cream?
I love that question. My number one suggestion for that would be to be okay with the fact that first of all, there's no such thing as a food addiction. I will tell you that right now. Generally, if you can sit and ask yourself, how often when I eat these foods do I put myself down because of it? What is my reaction to myself, and how do I treat myself after I eat these foods? You might find that you actually have a negative response to yourself as far as kindness is concerned when you're eating those foods. And then that sort of exacerbates the issue altogether. So being kind to yourself and letting it be okay if you do eat those foods, and also allowing yourself to include them in your diet, is going to make all the difference in the world. There was certainly a time in my life, I'm going to get personal here, where I thought I was addicted to sweets. And it turns out it was because I was not allowing myself to have those. So I craved them. I wouldn't allow myself to have them all week long. And then the weekend would come and I would just go to town on them. But if you actually allow them and kind of give yourself unconditional permission to eat those foods without berating yourself or putting yourself down, chances are you won't be as quote unquote addicted as maybe you are now. And I am happy to expand on that more. I would also recommend to anyone who asks that question, the book Intuitive Eating, or even the 6-week course by the Integrative Medicine Department.
What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting?
I thought that I was actually really excited to listen to I think it was a dietitian who talked about it last week. There was a whole 30 or 60 minute presentation on it through Your Plan for Health, and I had signed up for it. I was so excited. I didn't get to see it, but anyway, I read through the slides, and my thoughts are this. I am not a fan of diets, period. So whenever anyone asks me my thoughts on any type of diet, I always am honest and say that diets just do not work. Depending on what you're trying to achieve from intermittent fasting, in my personal opinion, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, mostly because it's just not sustainable. It's not something that you can do for the rest of your life. You might be able to do it for a month or a year, maybe even a couple of years, but eventually you're not going to want to do it anymore because it just isn't promoting a positive relationship with food.
We'll do a few more. Do you have any low FODMAP suggestions for prebiotics?
I love that question because I followed a low FODMAP diet for 10 years and it's really, really tough. You're exactly right. Whoever asked that question, it's really hard. My only suggestion that I can think of off the top of my head is, because all the things I listed are also the worst things if you are following a low FODMAP diet: onion, garlic, inulin, all that. Regular Girl is a prebiotic supplement that you can purchase, and it is certified low FODMAP. It's called Regular Girl. That I would suggest.
Where does apple cider vinegar fit into food group, or is it a probiotic?
That's a really good question, and I'm really not sure the answer to that. I could look it up. We could probably Google it and find out, but I really don't. I would like to say it's a probiotic because most vinegars, I think, are probiotics, but I don't know that for sure, and I don't want to give the wrong answer.
We'll do one more. Again, sorry for those questions that we haven't gotten to answer. I encourage everyone to reach out to Gina and have a conversation, but we'll do. I read how adequate vitamin D levels are needed to combat or minimize effects of COVID-19. In Ohio, above 37 degrees of latitude, we don't get enough sunlight to make it. What should we do? Vitamin D is fat soluble, so it can be toxic if too high.
Yeah, so it's very, very hard to get too much vitamin D, but I will just put this statement out there. Obviously, everyone should talk to their doctor or dietitian before you start taking a vitamin D supplement. But what I personally take is about 1,000 IUs per day. But I think it wouldn't hurt to get your vitamin D tested. You know, I think a lot of people are probably really, really low, and it would not hurt to start taking a 400 IU supplement every day. I do that throughout the entire year. I actually do every other day during the summer when it's actually sunny outside, because you can get it from the sun. But I generally take 1,000 every single day in the winter, in the spring, in the fall, and then I skip every other day in the summer. But again, do not just start doing that. Talk to your doctor first, but it's generally very innocuous.